today's lesson is called the butterfly effect. Now, that comes from the saying that if a butterfly flaps his wings in North America, it can cause a hurricane someplace thousand miles away. What that means is the cumulative effect of little bitty things is great and is powerful. So I'm going to go to the end of the story now. I want you to turn to 2 Samuel 12, 15 through 18. And in fact, I'm just going to tell you that story just to start with it. That is, I'm going to go there. I changed my mind twice already. So you go with this. And the Lord afflicted the child that Uriah's wife bore to David, and he became sick. David therefore sought God on behalf of the child. And David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. The elders of his house stood beside him to raise him from the ground, but he would not, nor did he eat food with them. And on the seventh day the child died, and the servants of David were afraid to tell him that the child was dead. For they said, Behold, while the child was alive, we spoke to him, and he did not listen to us. How then can we say to him that the child is dead? We may do him some harm. David had a very sad life. Even though he was anointed king, Saul chased him and tried to kill him. He had so many things in his life that were sad. But I think because the people were so afraid he might even kill himself, that this was his low point, the saddest point in his entire life. Well, we're going to discuss on how he got there. How he got to this terrible place. And it starts with a little flap of a butterfly wing. Just a little bitty thing. I want you to turn now to 2 Samuel 11, verses 1 through 18. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. That is such a simple little statement. You might just pass over that if you read it 1,000 times and it doesn't mean anything. But this was the time when kings went out to battle. But David stayed in Jerusalem. The tiny flap of a butterfly's wing. Now his duty was to go to battle with his troops. He was the king. He was to lead them into battle. Now he didn't stay home because he was afraid. The scriptures say that one of the reasons that Saul was angry with him was the people would sing and shout. Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. David was a great warrior. I think he felt that he had the best general in the world. He had the best army, and he had God over that, and he didn't need him. And so he could be lazy for once. You know, he had a hard life. He had He could be lazy for once and just relax. What's wrong with that? Well, because it wasn't what he was supposed to do. Now, I will tell you from a personal thing, being lazy is not always a good thing. I'll tell you a story in my life. We were canoeing on the Clackamas River in Oregon. And I love going on rapids more than almost anything. I think it is so exciting and wonderful. We had made 2 runs down there, and we had a guy that was taking the pickup and following along the road so he could pick us up at the other end and bring us back. Well, he said, "Can I go around too? Can I canoe?" Well, the other canoes, we had 2 canoes, they said, "We don't want to go anymore. We're tired." But the guy in my canoe and myself, we said, "Okay." But I got lazy. I was in the bow. You know, and that's a responsible place. Well, I said, "Well, let's all 3 go down, and I'll be in the middle of the canoe." Because I wanted to be lazy and not have to do anything. He didn't tell me that he couldn't swim and that he was terrified of the water. You know, canoes can tip. Well, if you have a canoe with 3 people and you're going over a rapid, well, the front end of the canoe is going to be up in the air. Scout's honor. He stood up, leaned over, and put his paddle in the water. We both went the other way as fast as hard as we could. But physics, you can't beat physics. We went in the water, and yeah. Don't be lazy. But I think that's what David did, is he wanted to just have a little time to himself. Now, verse 2. It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. This whole thing started with him not being where he was supposed to be. He shouldn't have been there. Maybe if Bathsheba had known that he was home, she wouldn't have been doing that. But he wasn't supposed to be there. He was where he wasn't supposed to be. Little things. When you start not doing your duty to God, little things build up quickly. David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, "Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" So David sent messengers and took her. And she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanness. Then she returned to her house. And the woman conceived, and she sent and told David, "I am pregnant." He was where he wasn't supposed to be. He saw something he wasn't supposed to see. And he said, "Well, who is she? Bring her in. She is the wife of one of his faithful soldiers." He not only commits adultery, but he betrayed his men. There is, in my mind, very few things that are more distasteful than betrayal. And when you betray not only your wedding vows, when you betray one of your trusted men, that is pretty low down. The king had the duty to protect his people, but instead of protecting Uriah, he betrayed him. And now he's caught. And I wish that all young people would read this story. It only takes once. Mm-hmm. If you mess around, it can happen. I'm sorry, but I wish all young people would read that story and would learn from that. Because yes, it can happen to you. She's praying. What's he going to do? He did a little something, then he did a big something, and now he's caught. So David sent word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab was doing, and how the people were doing, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house, wash your feet." And Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. David, like so many times when we get in trouble, we think that deviousness will get us out of it. You're going to be devious. Come on home, Uriah. Tell me what's going on. You go home. And now nobody will know it's my kid. But Uriah, unlike David, was faithful. He was faithful to his king. And he was faithful to his men out in the field. If they couldn't go home to their wives, he wasn't going to go home to his. When they told David Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, "Have you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back." You would hope that as a good man, a man after God's own heart, David would wake up at this. Because Uriah is saying, "I can't do what you did. I can't stay here, eat, drink, and be merry and be with my wife when everybody else is out there." David tried again, and it didn't work. So we're going to skip down to verse 14. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, then draw back from him, that he may be struck down and die." And as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men. And the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. David had Uriah murdered. He went from being lazy and staying home to adultery, to betrayal, and to the ultimate betrayal of a faithful soldier of his. He had him murdered. Now, why he did not see what was going on, I don't know. But I think it's because of the butterfly effect. It started so simply, with such a little deviation, that he was then focused on keeping himself out of trouble and just did not pay attention to what he was doing. And probably had all sorts of justifications and all those things by doing something that was so far out of his character. We'll go back to 2 Samuel, the 12th chapter, and we're going to go to verse 7, I believe, because I'm not going to read the whole thing. I might do a sermon on this soon, but we'll go... Nathan told him a story about a man who had sheep, and a rich man who had many took the poor man's sheep. And David got upset. I'm going to read verse 5. Then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man, and he said to Nathan, "As the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. And he shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing and because he had no pity." And then comes probably one of the bitterest verses in the entire Bible. Nathan said to David, "You are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Saul." And he goes on and says all the things that God gave him, and that he did evil. Now the next thing is down in verse 13. David said to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." And Nathan said to David, "The Lord also has put away your sin. You shall not die." Nevertheless, because by this deed you have utterly scorned the Lord, the child who is born to you shall die. The good thing is he's changed. He saw what he did was wrong. He saw that and he changed. But unfortunately, just like with the butterfly effect, once something starts, it goes to the end. And this child would die. We're going to go down now to verse 22. Now you remember, we talked about how sad he was. That's where we started. They were afraid he would kill himself. He said, "While the child was alive, I fasted and wept. For I said, who knows whether the Lord will be gracious to me that this child may live." He wanted to change God's mind. But now he is dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me. God has a way of flipping the script. Satan thought when he had the Son of God crucified that he would win. But God flipped the script and turned that into salvation for everyone. God flipped the script here. David becomes even more faithful now than he was in the beginning, because he now has another reason to be righteous. I can go to him. He can't come to me. He always wanted to be righteous because he had a heart like God's. He knew what was right. He wanted to do right. That was his character. But like all of us, when you take one little step away, it can become a big step. But now he has another reason. Not only does he want to be righteous for righteousness' sake, but now he truly wants to go to heaven. I think before this, I really don't think that David was worried about going to heaven. I think he was worried about doing what was right. I just want to do what's right. I want to do what's right. Because that's right. That's just the kind of person I am. But now he's decided to make triple sure that he's right, because he wants to go and be with that son. So that's the two lessons from this story. The first one is it's just a little flap of a butterfly's wing, doing something just a little different than you know God would want you to do, can pile up and turn you into the most vile of sinners. You know, because God sees sin as sin. We don't. We would say, well, yes, he was supposed to. He had a duty to God because this was God's kingdom. He was sitting on God's throne. He was supposed to do that. Just such a little sin. Little teeny. But it turned so big. But in God's mind, it was big in the beginning. But that little sin turned so big, but when he came back, he was able to be forgiven, and he was able to not only get back to where he was, but to become even more faithful to God. Number one, be careful of those little bitty steps, because they turn bad so quickly that you won't even realize it. And number two, when you realize, when you're reading the Bible, that I am the man. It's me God's talking about. Change your ways and decide to go to heaven. It doesn't matter how far down the road you slide. It doesn't matter what sins you get into. God can forgive you, and you can become a person that everybody looks up to. Everybody looks up to David now. For this period of his life, he was a very vile person. Not worthy of anybody looking up to him. But he changed. When you do things wrong, change. And when you see somebody else covered in sin and vile, help them to see that they're the man, and believe that they can change and that they can be worthy of praise and honor again. Too often in my life, I have seen people who made mistakes, some of them terrible, but they've been written off. Nobody cared. Nobody could see any way of redeeming them. God is not that way. There is no person who is so steeped in sin that they cannot repent and be forgiven. If anybody needs to answer the invitation in a public way, you can come now as we stand.